This is DW News. I'm Gerhard Elfers. Welcome to our live stream on YouTube and on TikTok. And today we're looking up into the sky. The Artemis astronauts are on their long journey home after orbiting the moon. The mission has already been hailed as a triumph of international cooperation. But is it really? We will look at the international competition surrounding the moon. Will the moon be colonized? Well, US President Donald Trump says so. Will it be militarized? Seems likely these days, if you look at the current state of this world. We'll speak with an expert in a moment. He's calling for new laws for space exploration. But before we delve into the potential conflict, let's look at the peaceful achievements so far. There have been a few. Artemis is now well past its historic midpoint. Yesterday, Orion executed a flawless lunar flyby and breaking Apollo 13's distance record in the process. Meanwhile, the crew is conducting final system checks and preparing for the high-speed re-entry before splashdown. That's always the most exciting part of the return leg, and that is expected for this coming Saturday. And here's President Trump congratulating the crew on their achievements and inserting his vision of where US lunar missions will be headed from here on in. Let's have a listen to his voice in a call with the crew.
Your mission paves the way for America's return to the lunar surface very soon. We're going all out. We're doing everything we can, and it's headed up by Jared. We'll plant our flag once again, and this time we won't just leave footprints. We'll establish a permanent presence on the moon, and we'll push on to Mars. That'll be very...
Well, is all that even legal? That's one of the bigger issues we'd like to discuss beyond the technological marvels and breakthroughs. We're looking at who is part of the endeavor and who's not, and what that actually means for the rest of us down here. And if you have any specific questions for our expert, put them in the chat. I'll try and bring them up in my discussion with Professor Mike Lockwood. He's the president of the Royal Astronomical Society and a leading expert in space environment physics at the University of Reading in the UK. He's been a prominent voice in the discussion around NASA's Artemis program, warning that without updated international rules, lunar exploration risks becoming an, quote, interplanetary Wild West. Now, Professor Lockwood, let's start with what we just heard Mr. Trump say, planting the flag and all that. Is that already a sign of future discord for you?
No, not in itself. There's perfectly proper for America to be proud of what it's done, and planting a flag is a symbol of that. It doesn't mean they own it in any way, and that would be against international space law if they claimed that it did. But they have every right to be proud of what they've done, and planting a flag for me is no more than that.
Yes, there's enough reason for pride, that's for sure. But you mentioned international law. I want to briefly introduce our viewers to the so-called Artemis Accords. That's an international agreement created by NASA and the State Department in 2020. And it provides a common set of principles to enhance the governance of the civil exploration and use of space. And these principles include the exploration of space should enhance peaceful relations among states. The signatories should openly share all scientific data they collect. And signatories pledge to refrain from interfering with one another's use of outer space. And they pledge to avoid orbital debris, also known as space junk. And this is a very important point, the extraction of resources, for example, on the moon, should be done in compliance with the 1967 Outer Space Treaty. But that extraction does not necessarily mean national appropriation. Now, Professor, that sounds very confusing, but it is an important point. What does it mean and why is it important?
Well, the most important constriction, I think, of the International Space Treaty is that A, you can't own any part of the moon, and B, you mustn't contaminate it. Okay, so those are the two. Now, whether that's enough, I don't know. But what's worrying about the Artemis Accord is that it's not global. And specifically, what's really worrying is that it doesn't include China or Russia. And that's quite important because they're obviously major players. So by not having them as part of that accord means we're still the potential to have an exploitative sort of colonial frontier mentality that means you feel that you can make claim on parts and also go against the regulation that you don't contaminate the moon or any other planetary body.
Now, you have noted that Artemis has considerable geopolitical implication and is an international but not a global collaboration, as you've just mentioned. These geopolitical pressures, how do they drive this mission's urgency right now?
I think it's worth taking stock of where we are. And the analogy I like to draw is to Antarctica, because coincidentally it's 50 years since we explored the moon with actual feet on the ground. And it was 50 years after the initial explorations of Antarctica with Amundsen and Scott and Shackleton. It was 50 years later that we actually signed the Antarctic Treaty, which prevented anybody laying claim to it. Again, you mustn't contaminate it. You could make money there, you could have commercial activities there, but you couldn't, the important key was you didn't contaminate it at all. Now, that Antarctic Treaty was signed globally. Well, it was actually signed by all the major powers of the day. So America, Russia, actually us in the UK at that time. And therefore it stuck, it held. And my concern is that the mood of the world was very different back then. We'd been through 2 global wars. We'd had enough of war. There was the Cold War, and we were determined to find a coexistence and peaceful way through that. My concern is we're not in that place at the moment. We've forgotten that we don't want to be in that place. And my concern is that the will of the world might not be there to actually do what we did with Antarctica. And we do need to do what we did with Antarctica. One of the chief things that drives my thinking is that I'm very concerned, not so much with the lunar environment, although that could be spoiled, but with low Earth space, with what we call near Earth space, low Earth orbit, which is an unbelievably valuable resource for us. We use it for so much. We use it for communications, broadcast, disaster management, resource exploration. It's amazing. And science, climate science. It's fantastic, the amount of work that we're able to do through being able to use low Earth orbit. And we are in grave danger of not being able to use low Earth orbit because we keep putting junk there, and it takes longer. It takes a long time to come down. And actually, with climate change, it's taking even longer to come down because as you heat the lower atmosphere, the upper atmosphere cools, and that slows down the rate of re-entry. And anyway, we should be concerned because the amount of metals that we're depositing in the stratosphere through re-entering craft is almost certain to have a very bad effect on global ozone levels, if it isn't already. So we don't have the evidence for that, but the chemistry, the science is there that says we've got to worry about this. So I am particularly concerned that we don't think of, you can think of the moon and Mars in a frontier type way, if you like. It is a frontier. But we shouldn't be thinking that way about near-Earth space because we're already there, and it's a very valuable resource. We want to keep it. We don't want to spoil it for ourselves. It's incredibly important that we don't do that. So I'm kind of hoping that Artemis will be a platform for helping improve and tighten up international space law to prevent the misuse of space.
Are you optimistic that we were able to avoid that economic interests will lead to discord between spacefaring nations?
That's the fear. That is the fear. I have to say,
do you see signs that that is already happening?
Yes, I do. I wonder what the motivation a lot of the billionaires and so for putting money into the companies that are supplying the mission for Artemis, because a lot of the commercial involvement at the moment is in the mission, in the building of craft and rockets, and in the operation that, of course, used to be done by the state and is now being done on a commercial basis. I have no problem with that per se. I just worry about the motives behind it and where that might lead. One thing I need to say, though, is that I approached the launch of...
I need that. Put it in.
I approached the launch of Artemis with some trepidation. I was fearful. And I think it's interesting. William Anders, who took that famous Earthrise picture that was so important for understanding the limited resource that is Earth and environmental factors and sustainability, he famously said, we went all the way to the moon and we discovered the Earth. And I kind of hope that Artemis has gone all the way to the moon and helped us rediscover humanity, because there's some wonderful stories in there. I mean, Wiseman and his own personal story with the loss of his wife, Carol, and the way they've named a crater after her. These are very human stories. And the day before the flyby of the back of the moon, the astronauts were woken up with a recorded voice message from Jim Lovell. Now, Jim Lovell was the commander for Apollo 13, and he recorded it just a couple of months before he died. And actually, I had the good fortune to meet Barbara Lovell, his daughter, recently in London, and we were discussing how the whole of the world got behind Apollo 13 and tried to help them home and was wishing them well. And I think invoking that spirit of global cooperation is actually one thing that Artemis can do. And it's had an effect on me. I am considerably moved by some of the things that have happened during the mission. So I'm not as pessimistic, perhaps, as I was before the mission.
But instead of international corporations that you've just mentioned, we're seeing signs for international competition. Let's hear, we have a brief soundbite here from a NASA administrator, Jared Isaacson.
I think competition is a factor in this as well. You know, it's a great way to mobilize the resources of a nation and concentrate on something extremely challenging, and that's what we did in the 1960s. And I think with absent some competition, we focused a lot on partnerships and all that we could do collectively with respect to science and discovery. But competition can be a good thing, and we certainly have competition now.
Now, there was lots of competition back in the day that was between the USSR and the US. Who are the competitors now?
Oh, well, it's China and to some extent India. India has a very vibrant space program, indeed, and a very vibrant economy these days. So, yes, there's competition, and that's fine, that's great. Competition does spur humankind on to great achievements, and that's fine. The danger is that that rhetoric turn into commercial competition, that you're competing for the resources of the moon, the minerals, and they're interested in water ice as a source of energy. And that's where the danger starts, okay? If that becomes an international race to actually extract wealth from the moon, that's a different issue.
But that's a very, very interesting point.
People are very careful not to cross that line.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point you're making there. Let me just ask, I mean, extracting resources from the moon. I mean, we spoke about water that is mainly for local consumption on the moon for a future space station, as far as I understand it. But also there's other minerals there, as you've just mentioned. But how realistic is it that these resources could ever be extracted at scale and returned to Earth? Is that economically viable? Or is it even possible right now?
At that time,
well, it's possible, but I think the returns would probably become the most expensive materials ever known that man has ever known. So, yes, I think there's a lot of wild thinking going on there, I think. And there are other issues, actually, as well. The moon's a pretty hazardous place to be. In fact, being outside Earth's magnetic field is extraordinarily hazardous in terms of the radiation environment. And there may be things you can do, like digging caves on the moon to shelter in for permanent bases, but people going back and forth are at risk. And if you do it often enough, the statistics say then they'll get caught in a bad radiation storm, and that is extremely worrying. So whether it's viable and possible, I personally do have my doubts, but I just don't want to see people even trying.
Now, do you see any, what are the benefits that you see for the US or even humanity if they manage to establish a permanent base station on the moon? There will be benefits. I mean, for one thing, they'll have to solve the radiation problem. So living in a potentially lethal radiation environment will actually be quite useful. It's always true with science and technology like this that when you solve problems, they have spin-offs. Okay, so just the sheer fact you're presented with enormous problems that you set out to solve will actually produce all sorts of things that nobody expected. For example, I'm talking to you through the internet. That was produced by science to solve a problem. It was to solve the problem of the amount of data that the Large Hadron Collider in Geneva was going to generate. And so the internet was the data solution to that, and it mushroomed into a whole industry that we can't conceive of life without now. So science and technology does this. You're looking for one thing, you're developing one thing, and suddenly you have something else as well. So there will be spin-offs, I can guarantee that. I mean, it was always a bit of a joke that the original space race just produced Teflon. Yeah. But that wasn't true. There was so many different spin-offs and miniaturization of electronics was really important for the for the Apollo missions, and one of the reasons why it was so successful. And again, that led to the whole technological revolution, solid state electronics. So it will, I can't predict what they'll be, but it will have benefits without doubt. That echoes a question that was just posted on our YouTube channel by user Seiki Mashan. We've been exploring space for so many years. How do we get the benefit from that in the long term? I think you've just mentioned that. But do you see any particular detailed benefit that we will be seeing in the short term, maybe? Let's say in the next 3-4 years?
No, if I'm honest, no. I personally don't, but that might be my lack of imagination, which can be considerable. I haven't really thought about it, no. My own science could benefit potentially from it because there may be information about past radiation storms that can be recovered from the lunar soil. There's likely to be benefits in terms of developing materials that are particularly tough. I mean, one thing that, again, is terrible on the moon is the soil. It's unbelievably nasty and abrasive. It's horrible stuff. And materials that are you can work in, but are still strong enough to actually stand up to that environment, would be quite an achievement. So, and they would have applications here on Earth. But if I'm honest, no, I don't think I see immediate benefits. But problem solving always produces some benefits.
Now, you just having said that, would you then agree with our user Betchface, who said it's just a waste of tax dollars? Or can you at least understand this sentiment?
Oh, I do. And I have another concern about the role of the billionaires in this. And that is that they are tax dollars and they're going to already very, very wealthy people and their companies. And whether I would be happy about that if I was an American taxpayer is a slightly moot point. I personally would much prefer it to be the state doing it on taxpayers' money rather than companies doing it on state money, on taxpayers' money. That's my personal preference. I do think the spin out of science and technology from state organizations tends to be better than commercial ones. And I really mean that. I really do. If you look at your iPhone, just about everything that makes your iPhone great was developed on taxpayers' money by state organizations or universities. So I would much rather that were the case, but maybe in this modern world that isn't possible anymore. But it's certainly been a terrific model for driving innovation and things that do help mankind.
Now, we're looking currently at this mission. That's 3 Americans and a Canadian. I would like to sort of broaden the view a bit again about the fact that China and Russia are not part of the Artemis Accords there. Why did they not sign up to it?
Presumably for the same reasons of national pride and prestige that makes America want to put a flag on the moon. So maybe they just didn't feel that they would get a good deal out of a collaboration. I don't know. I don't know if negotiations even got started to try and bring them in. But when you have major space players who are not included, that's a bit of a worry. That's not the way the Antarctic Treaty was done. The Antarctic Treaty made sure it was signed by all the major players, the relevant people.
Do you see a danger of, I mean, we're looking very far ahead now, but do you see a danger of militarization of the moon and space? If getting resources back ever did turn out to be not only viable but profitable, yes, definitely. So much global conflict revolves around resources. And so, yes, I think if that was the way it went, I would be very worried about that. I'm not sure it's a worry that would affect me in my lifetime, but I worry about these. I have 3 wonderful grandchildren, and I worry about what the world's going to be like for them. So, and, you know, we're bestowing that generation so many problems. I mean, we really are. And I really think that this is not another one that they need, that there's a war going on our only satellite planetary body. Now, you have warned that a frontier mentality, which we're seeing right now, could lead to an interplanetary Wild West. What do you mean with that?
Okay, I was drawing an analogy to what happened in America. I believe there are 2 types of frontier thinking, frontier mentality. I think there's a conservation mentality, so people who go out into the wilderness to preserve that wilderness and protect it, and a colonizing frontier mentality, which is the opposite, that they go out to exploit it and get rich. Okay, and the latter always produces unsustainable behavior. They do a lot of damage before they're finally stopped. And that's what I meant by a Wild West, that actually people are behaving in a way that should be illegal, even if it isn't, and is just unsustainable and just does lasting damage. So that's really why I really want to see the international regulation of space beefed up. Space law is probably no longer fit for purpose, although when it was drawn up, the Outer Space Treaty did have the foresight to say this doesn't just apply to states, it applies to companies working from states as well. So it applies to everybody. You don't get around it by saying, oh, this is a company, it can do what it wants. It can't.
Now, before we go, are there any warning signs, any practical signs that you would see that one could say that all this lunar activity is going in the wrong direction?
Not yet, no. I just want to make sure that it doesn't by having the legislation to stop it. But no, as I say, I approached the launch of this mission with some personal trepidation about where this was all heading. And I have been rather reassured by the human side of it, just the human element that has come into it, and the admiration for the four and for past missions, for Jim Lovell and all that. It has come back to me, and I found myself being quite emotional about the whole thing. So I am hopeful that the positive side of it, the success of humanity against the odds and doing difficult things, will actually come through. And so I am more hopeful than I was before the mission started. And some of that is just the wonderful character of the four astronauts and the togetherness and the humanity that they've shown.
That's a very hopeful and positive statement to close our live stream for today. Thank you very much, Professor Mike Lockwood, for sharing your insights and experiences with us and our viewers. To all of you watching out there, especially to those who sent in their questions, thank you very much for your participation and for making this live stream a platform for genuine dialogue and understanding. I'm Gerhard Elfers in Berlin. Thank you.